Good afternoon. I'm Antonio Tijerino with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. Welcome to our emergency charla on how Latinos can be better allies to the Black community. But it also applies to all allies, not just Latinos. And I know we have a good group of non-Latinos that are joining us as well to get this instruction. We need to be strong allies, not just during this current moment of protest and national soul searching, but going forward in everyday life, professionally, personally, across all situations. And one thing we know is that racism is in every situation. Racial violence and injustice have going on in this country for 400 years and more. And George Floyd's death is just the latest example of our country's and the world's shameful legacy of violence and mistreatment of African Americans. Black Lives Matter. After attending multiple rallies and protests with my kids, by the way, and having some big conversations with allies or potential allies, including very uncomfortable ones, where you discover different sorts of racism, even when people are well-meaning, we wanted to be better equipped to be better allies to the Black community by the Black community, which is why only Black people will be speaking today, including Black Latinos or Afro-Latinos. It's also important that we have a broad sense of perspective of the Black community and not just one person representing everyone. I have never felt comfortable speaking on behalf of the Latino community, and I've always said that I'm led by our community, not the other way around. That's why we started doing these community-based charlas, so we're able to learn, understand, and better serve our community. We are thrilled to get the individual perspectives across age groups, across genders, sexual identity, religions, ethnicities, and immigrant statuses, among other factors. So we are asking for this broad perspective and instruction. I also want to mention that a part of a big influence on me was reading a book by a monk named Thich Nhat Hanh, who was nominated by Martin Luther King for the Nobel Prize back in the 1960s. Thich Nhat Hanh wrote about deep listening or compassionate listening, which he said could actually serve to lessen the suffering of the person speaking. This is also part of the reason we're doing this. This is not a time for Latinos or other groups to talk. This is a time for us to listen, learn, mobilize, and serve in support of our African-American brothers, sisters, and non-binary siblings going forward. The Charla format are 5-minute presentations on experiences, ideas, resources, and connection. Please know that our speakers are self-selected to provide their truths, experiences, and guidance based on their perspectives. These are not people that necessarily live in this space. We just want to hear what their experiences are like and how we can be better allies. Their thoughts are their own, and we are simply providing this platform. Also, it's good to know that we had over 2,000 RSVPs within the first 24 hours. We only announced it yesterday, and there are even more now. I think it's up to 2,500 as we continue to raise our Zoom limit. Charlas are unfunded so far. It's just like much of the programming we've been doing, including this. But we appreciate the partnership of Univision, who actually helped us raise that Zoom limit. So thank you, Ron. Also CHCI, which will feature Marco, HIP, Friends of the National Museum, and the Latinx Education Collaborative. My colleague, Dario Collado, will be hosting on behalf of our organization. Please feel free to use the chat feature on Zoom to agree with the speakers, ask questions, or make your own comments on your perspectives. This Charla is also streaming on Facebook Live, YouTube, and other social media platforms.
Oh boy.
And I want to thank to my board members who are watching, appreciate you supporting so passionately these important programs. And now please welcome Dario Collado, and please stay safe, stay connected, stay actionable.
Thank you, Antonio, and thank you, Hispanic Heritage Foundation, for this incredible forum, and as Tony mentioned, for all 2,500 of you who have signed up and joined. Our first speaker today is Myisha Gatson, and she is the founder and CEO of Prolong Care Solutions, and she will be speaking on personal experience. Myisha, take it away.
Thank you, Dario, and thank you to the Hispanic Heritage Foundation and the leadership of HHF for pulling together such a critical conversation. I'm honored to be a part of it. I didn't know I was going to be the first speaker, but I kind of thought about some framing thoughts, and luckily they're coming into play. I wanted to level set on terminology around in this conversation first and foremost. I think we throw around a lot of loaded words when it comes to issues of race and social justice. And I wanted to make sure we come at it from a level playing field. So one, I think there are three big categories that we throw around. One is unconscious bias or prejudice. And I think of that as, when you have a wrong thought because you lack knowledge, maybe you're ignorant of the truth. But once you're educated, that you'll think or act differently if you're given the opportunity. And then you elevate to the level of racism or bigotry, where there's wrong thought, but it's fueled by hatred, malice, ill intent. And then the next level of that is institutional racism, which is essentially bigotry institutionalized and policies that are made on the basis of the ill intent. And so we're talking about these, really graphic things that have happened to our community in the last few months. And I think it's really important to know what part of those three levels of racism in our country we're dealing with. And I think they each require a different response. I believe the ally conversation is the first, which is the unconscious bias, maybe prejudice piece, where we're starting with those who are open and willing to think differently should they have relevant information. And so that's where I'm coming at, talking about my experience. I grew up in Stockton, California, and when my mom got remarried to an electrician, we moved to the north side of town, which was considered the rich side of town, and there were mostly white people. I was the only Black person in most of my classes from 5th grade all the way through through high school. And then I went to Stanford undergrad and was still, a super minority of the folks on campus. So I've had this experience of having to live a side life of being Black when I go into Black churches and being active in the NAACP, and then having a code switch to be, accepted and to be a part of my day-to-day, which was my school life. And so I've thought a lot about this, and I've had conversations with friends that are not Black in the last few weeks, and it's been really enlightening. I think what I wanted to focus on for the purposes of the short amount of time I have here is, one, the action plan. I think the first thing that comes to mind is that there's a need. I came up with 4 steps. One, I'll lay them out. One, the first is give space. 2 is there's a need for agreement. And that part of the agreement is giving grace and being compassionate. And then the 3rd is the acknowledgement, the truth and reconciliation of it all. And then the 4th is restoration and rectification. So I'll go back to the first, which is giving space. The recent events that happened are not new to Black people. They've just opened old wounds, and it comes with a level of re-traumatization. We've had to confront this pain, hurt, anger, frustration, and rage for most of our lives, but we also work simultaneously to keep it in check. So when we watched those videos, it took us right back. And when I say right back, it's not that, yes, we were all horrified by it, but the people in those videos looked like my mom. They looked like my brother. They could have been my sister. It could have been me. Could have been my son. Could have been my daughter. And that's the level of pain that I think doesn't get conveyed. I got followed by a cop last week, and I've never felt this way before. Like, I've always known I know my rights. I know how to act. I grew up in the NAACP. I had a panic attack when I realized the cop was following me, because I figured out how to show that he was tried to put on his blinker and turn it off, turn it on when I turned mine on, turn mine off, his off when I turned mine off. And I called my husband. I'm like, babe, I want to live. I don't want to die. I'd never had that reaction before. And it was completely a surprise and shock to me that the impact of just watching that video would completely shift my trajectory. So just know, as allies, that we're still processing this. And day to day, I've gone from days that I cry about it to days I'm angry about it to, days where I'm like, yeah, it's more of the same. But there's just a need to acknowledge that space. I think with the agreement, giving grace to me is really about Black people giving grace to people who have never confronted their privilege or have chosen to stay silent or distant before, but are now coming out and trying to be a part of this conversation. And you have to understand that many of them were silent because they didn't want to say or do the wrong thing. They didn't want to misspeak, or they didn't want to make assumptions because they were afraid of being rejected or being labeled a racist. So I think that we need to be really compassionate and be open to having those conversations. I think that for allies, when you don't know what to do, the litmus test should be to stand on the side of truth and justice. Silence only assures our mutual defeat. So speak up and know that your act of using your voice to help the voiceless is powerful and what allies should be doing. and that that we will stand with you on that. And if there are any misunderstandings, that we can have that open conversation and dialogue to get through it. And so, just a note of grace, and we're in this recent proliferation of cancel culture. President Derek Johnson, the NAACP, was on Jimmy Fallon, and he posted the video on his website, on his Twitter or Facebook. And I went and looked in the comments, and someone was like, this doesn't even matter because Jimmy Fallon wore blackface. And I'm like, we have to have a space for, we're not defining people by their worst mistake, that people have the chance to make mistakes in the past, apologize for them, make amends, and become new allies in this fight, that we don't just block them out because of what happened in the past. So I think we need to just give grace, extend grace so our allies can become allies and come out and stop being in silence. And lastly, I think just in closing, we may not be able to agree on everything, but our unity and our alliance is not based on agreement. It's based on love, empathy, understanding, and a shared commitment to justice and equality. But know this, justice is just the start. Once you have justice, you still have fear, you still have brokenness, you still have inequality, you still have a sense of the unknown. We need to go from justice to healing, to restoration, and finally to rectification. And we can only do that with you. So thank you for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Myisha, for those inspiring words and for thought provocative, to say the least. Our next speaker is my good friend, Harper. He's an actor, author, and activist, and part of ABC's #1 show, The Good Doctor, author of 4 New York Times best-selling books, and founder of the Manifest Your Destiny Foundation. Hill, take it away. Oh, Hill, you're on mute.
Okay. Hey, Dario, thank you so much. Myisha, that was so beautiful and well said, and so happy to follow you, because something that you touched on towards the very end is something that I really wanted to double down on in terms of this discussion, since I was told I was going to be towards the front. And the idea here is to really talk about fear, because in many ways, what's coming up, I think, when we talk about allies is a lot of fear-based thinking. And fear is that #1 emotion that stops us from taking action. And the one thing that we know right now, the one thing that we cannot do is nothing. And if folks are coming from a state of fear, they're more apt to do nothing. And approaching this work from a place of vulnerability and, anti-racism starts with empathy, as you said. And if we can't get to that vulnerable state and that empathetic state, you can't get there in a fear state. And a lot of the folks I've talked to around these issues, particularly non-Black folk, whether they're Latino folk or white folks, what they tend to bring up is fear-type reactions when we talk about sustained systemic change and institutional racism, systemic racism, and actually making systemic change. One of these words that's come up recently for folks is defund the police, right? And a lot of response that I've been getting quietly in my ear, because folks are afraid to come out necessarily say something about that, is, hey man, we need the police, dog. That's what we need. And rather than actually taking a step back and saying, well, what does it mean? Well, we're talking about fundamental systemic change. Defund the police represents that, but folks aren't saying there's going to be zero protection. Folks are like, the focus needs to be public safety, public security. What do institutions that actually instill public safety and security, what would they look like? And what's the highest functioning form of that? Right now, it's certainly not military-style policing that we have. So that's what we're talking about when folks say that. If folks are able to actually hear it and then have a conversation about, what do you really want in your community? Whether you're Black, white, Latino, whatever, you want safety, you want security. And you don't want to feel that military-style policing is victimizing your community, stealing young people from your community, incarcerating them, etc. And so when we talk about how can we operate from a place of allyship and solidarity, I would suggest first, solidarity starts with consistency and being willing and to show up. And so everybody that's on here, right now, I'd look at participants, 1,224 participants. That's an amazing number. All the folks that may be watching on Facebook Live, that's spectacular. But that's right now. And the question is, are we going to be able to collectively remain consistent and sustainable. You know, I went to Ferguson, Missouri the day after Michael Brown was killed because I was asked to come there by a pastor to work with some of the young people through my foundation. And here's the deal. Young man, black man, shot by the police. Military-style policing measures were in place in Ferguson. There was an uproar, but the sustainability and the consistency did not follow through with systemic and institutional change. That's what we need to see here. And we need to step out of our fear place. It's about questioning modalities, questioning what folks are coming up with, questioning solutions, and saying, how can I support you and help you and work together? And that's important to me because, you know, Frederick Douglass told us without struggle, there is no change. There is no progress. And so we are in this together, y'all. We are in this together. Even if you start to break down things that are so similar between the Latino households, black households, you know, household income, Latino household income in 2016, what median income, $6,300. Black American household wealth factor, 7,000. White wealth factor, 140,000. We're talking about incarceration rates almost exactly the same in major metropolitan areas. We're talking about dropout rates almost exactly the same. Folks didn't make an uproar when we said when folks were defunding healthcare, when folks were defunding education in the communities, when folks were defunding economic support, housing, mortgages, all of the different things that hold up and support healthy communities. Folks weren't making an uproar about that, but when folks start talking about defund the police, they get scared, step away. Hey, man, that's going a little too far. Rather than stepping away, let's step in, let's lean in and lean into the conversation and lean into saying, hey, I want to support you and figure out ways to maintain this level of sustainable change. And, you know, as I close out, you know, Dr. King said that we're all tied together in a single garment of mutual destiny. He didn't say some of us are tied together. He said we're all tied together. And systemic, institutional, and radical change requires all of us being a part of the conversation. The solution ultimately is in conversations like this, and then figuring out ways that we can lock arms and move forward together. You know, one of my favorite words in the English language is the word courage. And those of you that speak Spanish know that the root or the etymology of that word is heart, corazón, right? Heart. And so when we talk about courage, when we talk about our heart, just ask a simple question. When you see a video like George Floyd, and when you understand things about Michael Brown, and you understand things about injustice and economic disparities and educational disparities and incarceration rates, what makes your corazón beat faster? What gets you going? And that's your answer of where you want to point your efforts. There's so many different lanes of work that we need to do together, but not everybody can do everything. What do you care about? What are you passionate about? And then find those people across race, across culture, across income that actually are passionate about those same things. There was a New York Times article that came out recently. We're talking about COVID, that blacks and Latinos die at twice the rate of white folks in New York City with COVID. We are inextricably linked, whether you like it or not. So let's work together, create solutions together, and work from our corazón to make change. God bless you all, and thank you for being on this.
Thank you, Hel. That was great. I really, really appreciate your wonderful insights in joining us in this very, very important conversation. Our next speaker is Maria Salmeron, who's an economics, government, and law student at Lafayette College and also a 2017 National Hispanic Heritage National Youth Award winner. And Maria will be speaking personal narrative. Maria, take it away.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Like Dario said, my name is Maria Salmeron. I'm a rising senior at Lafayette College studying econ and gov law because I have the aspiration to go into educational policy. I currently reside in Silver Spring, Maryland, but I was born in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. And as a matter of fact, August 2020 will be my 10th year anniversary of moving to the United States. So it's definitely being a year to commemorate, to say the least. I thought that I would begin my charla by prefacing that, I'm genuinely grieving the loss of Black lives. My brother, who unexpectedly passed away last year, and my father, who I lost in 2007 to cancer, were both Black men, Afro-Latino men. I'm grieving all over again, and the loss feels personal to the point that I'm angry, sad, upset, you name it. And for the purpose of this charla and for the focus on Latinx communities, I wanted to actually talk about the erasure and the invalidation of my lived experiences as an Afro-Latinx woman, because I think it's applicable right now more than ever. Now, like, if you talk to me, you get to know me, you know that being Afro-Latina is something that I celebrate and I'm proud of. I even say here and then, honestly, actually pretty often, that the intersectionality between my race and ethnicity allowed me to have the best of both worlds. However, the reason why I'm bringing this up and connecting it back to ideologies of erasure and invalidation is because it is prevalent to everything that's going on right now. Now you see like the death of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor are all countless examples of overt racism and white supremacy, as many of us know. But what I have been finding interesting, though, is I've been reflecting on my experiences navigating predominantly white spaces since I moved to the United States versus reflecting on conversations that I've had with other Latinx people or just my experience in general in Honduras, is the similarity in some of the ideologies that are used to erase and invalidate. On one hand, with my white peers, you know, I've been suffering through this phenomenon of colorblindness, that I don't see color crowd, there's only a human race cloud. And then on the other hand, with some of my Latinx peers, I've stumbled upon sentiments of colorism, which honestly like upsets me because like I mentioned, I champion my intersectionality and I think colorism is a mechanism to erase that and invalidate that. And I don't necessarily know how to digest that. I remember this one time in high school where I had a couple of exchanges with like Latinx peers proclaiming that, you know, I was just like, yeah, I'm from Honduras. Like we were getting to know each other. And I was hit with like, what are you talking about? Like, there's no Black people in Honduras. Or, you know, I would talk about my having a best of both worlds thing, which is like a term that I guess I've coined at this point, is you're not Hispanic, you're Black, or you're Hispanic, stop saying you're Black, as if my race and ethnicity are mutually exclusive. And, you know, bringing it back to how Latinx communities can aid Black people during these challenging times, I just think that debunking this misconception that is somewhat grounded on the ignorance that race and ethnicity are mutually exclusive in our world, in our very diverse world, I just truly feel that now more than ever is the time to scream this fight is ours versus this fight is only yours because of the color of your skin. And I'm not saying that just because, you know, I identify myself as Afro-Latina and like there's Afro-Latinx communities like all over like our world, but also because at the end of the day, the system has been failing Black communities and Latinx communities all across the US. And I just think that we're stronger together when we fight that together. So that's just like a little bit of food for thought based on my personal experience as I've been trying to think deeply about structural and systemic racism and its implications, but also just in general, the anti-Black ideologies that make it prevail in the first place, which honestly has been coming from a lot of different communities. So thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Maria. That was very, very insightful and really appreciate you sharing, you know, your personal experience, especially during this time. Thank you. Just to remind everyone, that our speakers are not professionals or experts, and they are part of a variety of Black communities sharing their experiences, thoughts, and personal perspectives. Please be mindful of this and be respectful in the chat and Q&A windows. And with that being said, and also please be mindful of the 5-minute window. Everyone's been great so far, and this has been a tremendous discussion as well. Our next speaker is Mr. Romell Cummings, who is a servant leader and youth advocate who will be sharing his own personal perspective. Romell, take it away.
Thanks, Dario. Winston Churchill once said, there's only one thing worse than fighting with allies, and that is fighting without them. I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak to you today, thankful for Hispanic Heritage for facilitating this. And I'll begin, fortunately, there hasn't been a lot of foundation, so this allows me to lay a foundation for ally and what ally means. The word ally means to combine or unite a resource or commodity with another for mutual benefit. And because we are here with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation today, who has been a personal ally of mine, as well as an ally with the Manifest Your Destiny Foundation, I would like to talk about that experience first. while the Manifest Your Destiny Foundation had our summer empowerment academies at Howard University, I contacted Antonio and the Hispanic Heritage Foundation and asked them to be a part by providing some foundation for coding, which is something that the Hispanic Heritage Foundation does and does well. And as an ally of ours, they were happy to do that and did that for several years. And that was a partnership that we forged, and it allowed us to provide a particular service, particular resource to our students, as well as allowing the Hispanic Heritage Foundation to, as an ally, to assist us with that and to allow them to touch the same lives that we were touching. Another instance that I want to talk about that relates to allies is while working for a large law firm, I was stationed in Germany for almost 2 years. So while there, upon arrival, I found it interesting that many of them were interested in knowing what is it like to be Black in America. And to me, just asking that question and collecting that information can be the first step in allyship. Asking honest questions and being able to use that and able to enable you to be an ally or to have a bit of understanding about a culture or about a person that you are not aware of. And in being an ally, it is okay not to know everything. An ally is not a spokesperson. Allyship is not about your speaking on behalf of Black people, but it's more about your being able to open doors, your being able to facilitate. When you see something, you say something. When you see something that's wrong, you say something. You speak up for it. Those are examples of things that allies do. Another instance, work-related instance, was where there was a problem, and there was a particular director that saw the problem and saw me and let me know that he saw me. And in that moment, it provided me with a bit of relief just to know that I was not invisible, that I was seen. And he later spoke up for me, as I mentioned previously. Speaking up for someone when you see something wrong is very important. Is an important role of an ally. And finally, there are a lot of resources out there on allyship. Antonio and I spoke earlier, or last week we spoke about it, about what allies are, what allies do, and I thanked him for being an ally of mine and an ally of the Manifest Your Destiny Foundation. As I said, there are many ways that you can support. And if you'll notice, the visual that I have up has 20 different suggestions in terms of what allies can do, from volunteering to financial support, to protesting, and checking on your Black colleagues. There's been a lot of information on that recently, just checking on your Black colleagues, checking on your Black friends, because oftentimes a lot of the information or a lot of what's going on, a lot of the activity is internalized by that person, or they're forced to carry that weight. But you're showing that, number one, showing that you care. Number two, asking, taking the initiative to ask how someone is doing is very important in that time. I hope everyone is well, and I believe my time is just about over. I see Dario looking at me funny, so I'm right there.
All good, brother. Thank you, Romell. Really, really appreciate it. Just to let everyone know that these slides will be shared along with a recording of this entire conversation on our website, hhf.org, beginning later this evening. And again, if you have a question and answer for any of our panelists, there is a Q&A button at the bottom. Feel free. And then also I see that folks are utilizing the chat webinar with their thoughts and suggestions as well. Our next speaker, and again, Romell, thank you so much. That was very, very insightful. Our next speaker is Elizabeth Boney, who's a senior associate at Whiteboard Advisors, and she will be speaking or sharing her personal experience. Take it away.
Marvelous. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or early afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you so much, HHF, and all that you guys are doing to create this space. I think it's such an important conversation. And as a Black woman who is living in America and grew up in the South, particularly North Carolina, it's really just uplifting and heartwarming to see these groups really merge to come together. One thing specifically I want to talk about today is, and Romell did such a great job like introducing me, it's just talking about how I believe that there's a multi-layer approach to becoming an ally. I think, when I think about allyship and what it represents, is almost as if you're planting a flower, right? And you're taking seeds and putting them into soil. And, the first layer of that, to me personally, that I've been just having these conversations even with myself, is just like discovering why this work is essential to you. I love the question, what is your personal stake in ending racism? And I think that is just such a beautiful way for everyone who is non-Black to break down, why is it essential that you're doing this fight? What is making your heart break? I feel as if it has to be something that's deeper than I just have a Black friend or a colleague who I love so much. It has to be intertwined and intergrained into who you are and what you stand for and your morals and your values, and understanding and knowing that, within humanity, the treatment of and the injustices that Black people have faced are not okay. And so I think, in addition to just really understanding and discovering why this work is essential to your personal purpose, I think that you really also have to educate yourself. I think education is so important. I work in higher education, and my family valued education so much. I come from a family of educators, and there's so many incredible resources, just from like Ta-Nehisi Coates to Austin Channing Brown and Ibram. I'm forgetting his last name, but he wrote this really great book on how to be an anti-racist. There's just so many great and rich resources from Black voices that are speaking now, even Rachel Cargill. Like, there's so many important Black voices that are speaking now who can really help you understand and see what it is that you might be missing from the perspective. I think Antonio, I love Thich Nhat Hanh a lot, and Antonio spoke a little bit about this earlier, is compassionate listening to, not to respond, but listening to further understand. Why are we saying that we need these like systematic changes? Defund the police is great. It's something, again, like even as a Black person, I'm understanding and I'm learning, well, what does defund the police actually mean? I am educating myself on these particular topics and issues as well. And so I think no matter who you are, your education should never end, and you should always be digging deeper to understand why these things, why we should be shifting our perspective on issues that might seem really radical, when in reality, they're actually not that radical at all. But in addition to just, digging deeper and finding out your why, I think in educating yourself, I think you have to choose which path of activism is right for you. There was this really beautiful diagram that I saw that there's so many different avenues that you can go through. And, some people might say, well, I can't protest for whatever reasons, maybe it's health reasons or whatever it is. Donating might be, your right way. There's so many different causes. There's so many different areas and avenues that you can be a true activist to the Black community. And so you don't have to just choose the one that you think other people or Black people might, commend you for, again, this is a very personal thing for everyone. And so I think it's really important that everybody just hone in on that. The one thing that they're going to do and dig deep. Don't try to do 10 different million things because you're going to burn out. One thing that I've been emphasizing with myself is this is a movement, right? This isn't just something that's going to appear for a couple weeks and then go away. No, like this is a movement. We're here to stay. And even as Black people, we are standing on the shoulders of our ancestors who came before us and who have been doing the work. And then lastly, I think it's just so important that if something that everybody can be doing is just talking to your community, right? About racism, about what's going on. It's not going to be hard. Everybody's talking about George Floyd protests, and maybe in that you'll find an anti-racism just accountability partner, and you'll speak your truth to your friends and your family and hopefully help them shift their perspectives as well. So anyway, thank you again so much for your time. And I hope that this will support each of you and the individual work that you have to do.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. And thank you to all of the organizations that are in this fight, because we are in this fight together. And the name of the author was Ibram Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist, by the way, which is an amazing book. Our next speaker is Natural Taylor, who's a 2019 Youth Awardee and graduating 2020 senior. Congratulations, Natural, from McKinney Technology High School, who will be sharing personal experience. Take it away.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Dario, for that wonderful introduction. And also thank you to HHF for allowing me this platform to share my perspective. So I'd like to start off with some context about me. I am Afro-Latino. I was born here. My mother is Latina. My father is African-American. So that just gives you some light as to my perspective and where I'm coming from. I am a senior in high school, so I'll be bringing like a youthful perspective with this. But essentially, I'd like to start off with some similarities I've definitely observed between the Latino and the African-American community. That is that we are definitely both very experienced with the injustice in America, as well as, the inequality that you can find in America. We're both groups that are, often criminalized, often targeted by the media, by the legal system, by police. So just that gives us a sense of fellowship and similarity, as well as a sense of activism and a sense of wanting to, change the bad things that we see in America. With that being said, some things that not only Latinx, but also just, non-Black people could do to help become allies, definitely would, for one, I would say be education. I know Ms. Elizabeth just touched on this, but educating yourself as to, the struggles that African Americans have to go through, as well as just the history behind the African American struggle is very important. Just for understanding the context of, the national events that are going on now, as well as the ones that have already happened, because, this is just one recent event, the murder of George Floyd. That was just one of many incidents that we've been dealing with for a long, long time. So that passion, that rage that some people may have, when they go out to protest and express that, you need to do research in order to understand why we feel that way. African Americans feel that way and feel the need to go out and make their voices heard. So educating yourself is definitely very important for any ally. And another thing that I've personally witnessed a lot is, I would call it the selective use of African American culture. I know a lot of Latinx, non-Black people, they like Black culture, they like Black music, they like the look, the apparel, the hairstyles. Some of them even adopt the lingo and things of that nature. But when it comes time to actually support Black people in issues that really matter in the nation, a lot of those people are silent, and that's definitely something that needs to be addressed, because just using the culture whenever it's cool and convenient, I don't think that's very appropriate when these people are struggling. These people are going through something. So that's definitely a matter that I've seen myself a lot, and it's a matter that a lot of the youth are bringing to light recently. Before now, people might not have talked about it as much, how people are using this culture, but not necessarily talking about issues that need to be addressed. But now with, the recent nature of everything going on, as well as, a lot of the popularity of Black Lives Matter and everything like that, people are coming out and saying, are you with us? Are you not with us? Exactly how far is your understanding of our culture, as well as your support behind us? So that's definitely an important one to discuss. I guess my last one would be a sense of bringing together a sense of unity. I know Latinx hail from many different countries, whether you be a first-generation immigrant, second-generation, a descendant. Your heritage would come from, a country perhaps aside from America. With that comes usually a strong sense of pride in where you're coming from, as well as patriotism for your country. But sometimes this could lead to sort of like cliquish behavior, maybe a sense of a sort of non-inclusiveness, of African Americans sometimes. And so I'm just saying that this is also something. A lot of it is inadvertent, a lot of it is involuntary, but it's definitely something that people should try to open their minds up. Be a little more open to sharing experiences with others. So I close off with saying that, as a youth, I'm very optimistic about the future between different communities, Latino, African American, other people of color. A lot of youth are together in this movement in Black Lives Matter, as well as just activism and fighting against what's wrong in America. So I leave you on a note of positivity that we're definitely going to be some future change makers. So I think.
Absolutely. Natural. Thank you so much. And you are the leadership is needed now, and youth are providing that with everything that's going on. So just know that you, the youth today, are providing that leadership that is so desperately needed. And we thank you for you leading by example. Before we get to our next speaker, just want to remind everyone, if you are making a comment, please make sure that all panelists and attendees, you hit all panelists and attendees so everyone can see your comment or suggestion or whatever you'd like to write on the chat board. Let's keep it going. This is incredible conversation so far. Our next speaker is Esther Rege. Esther will be speaking on her personal experience. Esther, please take it away.
Thank you. Esther Rege Berg, married not too long ago. Just to give a little bit of background about myself, I was born in Kenya, but have been in the United States for most of my life. I grew up in Northern Virginia, and as a first-generation American, my experience has been different than many other Black families who are from here. Two immigrant parents, both from Kenya. The message was always work harder than anyone else, so you never have to wonder if you're being discriminated against or if it is racism. But that's a word that was so seldom even mentioned. And so it took me a really long time to both personally, professionally, just generally speaking, to be more vocal, to find the words and courage to speak out where and when I saw injustice. And so the last few days have been painful.
Sure. Hey, we're with you. Go ahead.
Thanks. And so, you wake up with profound sadness. And outside of that, there is that call to action, to do something. As Hill mentioned, the number one thing you cannot do is nothing. And so, I felt like this is my time, this is my moment. But I also came around to the realization that everyone is on a different path. Everyone is learning and growing and trying to improve. At least that's what I'm telling myself. And so, I finally settled and decided, yes, I am going to do something. I'm going to do it in my own way. And so when thinking about how to be an ally, in general, for our Black brothers and sisters, but also for our Latinx brothers and sisters, there is a need to be courageous. I follow Awesomely Lovey on Facebook. She's awesome. But one thing that she said that I really, really took away was it's okay to say the uncomfortable thing as long as it's the truth and as long as it's coming from a place of love. So be true to yourself and find that passion. Someone else mentioned that before, and find where you have that value add. The other part of that is knowing where we have come from. The deepest history lessons that I've learned in the last few years absolutely did not come from the classroom. So, do the research. There are so many great African-American authors. And actually, there's a great book on white fragility, which provides some really, really great insights. But one piece that profoundly affected me was Nicole Hannah-Jones's 1619 project, both the podcast and her New York Times piece, really, really, truly illuminated that what we're going through as a country is systemic, and the system is not broken. The system was designed to work this way, unfortunately. So as we go through and dismantle the system, I think only then are we going to find justice, not just for African Americans and Black people, but also Latinx people and anyone who comes to America's shores. As an immigrant, I think that, you take that oath and you say the Pledge of Allegiance, and it makes you, the ultimate patriot, because you are consciously becoming a new nationality. And so as Americans, that dedication, that level of patriotism, don't let anybody take it away from you, and hang on to it and continue to love. Thank you, HHF, for this opportunity. It's always tragic to see another Black life taken by the police. But out of this tragedy, with all of the folks on this call and on this Zoom, I'm really, truly seeing love. And so thank you.
Thank you, Esther, for those inspiring words and frankly for your leadership. Where's much needed, leadership now. And also just want to let everybody know that this is a safe space, and these conversations are needed in all of our communities. So let's keep this conversation going. It looks like we have close to 1,300 participants still on the call, and great discussion thus far. Our next speaker is Mr. Michael Echols, who's the CEO and founder and a former cybersecurity director at Max Cybersecurity LLC, part of U.S. Department of Homeland Security, who will be sharing on his personal experience. Brother Michael, take it away.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate the opportunity anytime you guys provide it. Typically, I'm speaking to rooms full of older white men and white women. And I'll give you a little background to help you understand what and how that plays into this. So I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. I grew up knowing where in southern Alabama the plantation was. So that's an interesting thing. I think about children now. I think about my children really having no perspective on that. But as a 6-7-year-old, knowing that the plantation is right down the highway. Throughout my life, I experienced discrimination, slights, but I played sports, and I really didn't figure out the injustice and the oppression that I was actually going through until I got into my professional life. And I know that a lot of minorities in general go through that, right? It's an awakening when you get into your professional life. In my career, I was the chair of the communication sector. I was rolling out new capabilities for the White House. I was a rep to NATO CCPC. And to get there, though, I had to spend a lot of money for education. But the education that I was spending money for, I later found out that other people that I was competing against, they didn't need education. I want to just tell you that those types of things show you that there's a cost. There's a financial cost to racism. It's not just personal, right? And I was once told in the workplace that, Mike, you probably should hire more white people. And that struck me because I'm sure the white people in the work environment weren't ever told you should probably hire more minorities. I've been reorged out of positions. And when you're doing a great job, and I was doing a great job because I was working twice as hard. But when you're doing a great job and they can't move you out of the position, they move the organization, right? And so I'd say all that to give you some background and to say that those things that I went through, I experienced that in Puerto Rico. 2018, I had contracts to help restore the power in Puerto Rico. And from going to the bank to many, many other situations, light skin or white Latinos, in some cases, treated me worse than I've been treated by white people here in the continental United States. And I just wanted to get that point out there to help everybody understand that we did these things to each other, right? And so when we're talking about black and white and injustice, at some point we have to open up the kimono and talk about how we're treating each other. I'm going to give you a couple of points of where I think that we can sort of come together. But I want to tell you that one of the things that I stress to kids when I'm working with them is you have to understand how the system works in order to change the system. All the talk, all the marching, that's great. That shows passion, and you have to have passion. But at some point, you have to stop and get some education. For instance, when these people are killed and the city pays those families, they're using your tax dollars. It's not actually coming out of the insurance that the police department has, because the police at some point would lose their insurance. The city pays it from your tax dollars. There's three things that I think that Latinos can be very helpful right now. So I'm a cybersecurity expert. I give speeches around the world. One of the things that I've noticed is how powerful the internet has become. And it's a place where there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation going on right now. In the billions of dollars worth, I saw a photo that was forwarded to me that said, it was some black people marching, and they had on T-shirts that said, I'm protesting, I'm not voting. And that was fascinating to me as a cybersecurity guy because I noted it was fake, right? They are now trying to move you to a position that does not benefit you. Well, what I would say to my Latino friends is, when you see that, don't forward that crap. Do not be a part of that system meant to bring all of us down. Number two, support. I witnessed the destruction of careers, and I witnessed how when someone used the system and filed an EEO at the Department of Homeland Security, and rightfully so, because they were being discriminated against, not only did the organization step away from them and treat them like a pariah, but other individuals stepped away from them and treated them like a pariah. And what I would say to you is, be the person who is available, if not just to listen. It may save somebody's life because the stress becomes overwhelming. And then last, partnership. So as you've seen, bearing witness through word, deed, and video is powerful, right? But putting out a hand of partnership creates a team. And as a team, you can compete in this unbalanced world. And I'll finish with Martin Luther King said that shallow understanding of people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Michael. That was very, very deep and well needed. I know as a Dominican American, I hear it all the time. Dominicans ain't black. Are you black or Latino? And I know other Latinos hear that as well. So that being said, let's keep this conversation moving. This is really, really insightful. Our next speaker is Nadine Dogbo, who's an early childhood education student at Townsend University, and who will be speaking on how to show support, let go of past ignorance, and move forward educated. Nadine, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dario, for the introduction, and thank you to the HHF for this opportunity to speak on this platform. Just a bit of background about me. I am originally from West Africa, Togo. I came to America when I was 4 years old, and I'm 21 now, so I've had a lot of experience in America growing up for the majority of my life. I grew up in Maryland, Silver Spring, and moved to Rockville when I started my college education. Going to different schools in Silver Spring, I feel fortunate to be a part of a diverse community and where I grew up with people from all different types of backgrounds and be able to learn about their experiences and what they kind of go through. How to show support is where I'm going to start. Personally, I have a lot of Hispanic friends, Latinx friends, and I wasn't feeling so supported. So I took it upon myself to reach out to them and ask them, what are you doing during these times? And I had a lot of different responses back. I'm going to speak on 3 different experiences. My first experience is with a friend that I've known for a very long time, since kindergarten. And her experience, when I asked her, she immediately told me how she understands and sees what's going on and wants to be there for me, and told me how she's donating and doing her part, which I feel is a great way to be your ally. Just when your friends ask you, hey, what have you doing? What have you been doing? It's not to attack you. It's not to put you on the spot. It's to ask and to reassure that you support them and you have their back and you understand how important these times are. My second experience was from a friend who I've known since high school, and her response was very disappointing. She proceeded to tell me she voted, which I think was great, but then she also proceeded to make it about her and our relationship and how I haven't been there for her as a friend. And I think that's something that should not be done. During these times, it's so much bigger. These problems that are happening it's so much bigger than us. It's so much bigger than the personal everyday life, because this is life. This is life or death, and it's horrendous what's happening. My third friend, hers was better. It definitely made me happy, because when I approached her, I got comments like, oh, what have you done for the Latinx community? And I politely told her what I have done, and I feel as if she thought I was attacking her for even asking, what she has done. And I told her, I'm asking because you're a part of my life. I'm a Black woman before I'm your friend. I'm always going to be a Black woman. That's the identity that it's going to be out there, and that's how I'm going to have my experiences are going to go by. And she later on actually came back and apologized to me and let me know that she does support me and she does understand the severity of what's going on. And I felt like that was such an amazing thing to do, because it really showed me that the willingness to be allied, the willingness to let me know that she loves and supports me. Letting go of past ignorance. I'm 21 years old, and social media is basically like, my life. And a lot of things that I'm seeing on social media is people calling out their friends for saying the N-word and saying, making certain jokes about skin color. And letting go of past ignorance first starts with acknowledging your past ignorance, acknowledging what you have done. And it's not to be defensive. It's not to put on safe face. It's not to be defensive. It's not to flip the switch and play victim. No, if your Black friend is telling you, your past comments, your past the past things that you said have hurt me personally, and maybe they haven't shared that with you before, but they're sharing it with you now. I want you to take their feelings into consideration and really understand that it's just a place to understand the pain and to move forward. After the next step would be to just apologize. It's okay. We all make mistakes. We're all growing and human beings that are learning every single day. And to apologize is to show that you feel and understand that what you've done has affected them. And put the pride aside, please. This is not the time for pride. And just moving forward, educated, asking questions. How can I support? I personally did not know when wasn't taught in school so many things about the African American community. I feel like when we were being taught in school, it was kind of just brief and the severity wasn't emphasized about what Black people went through. And now that I'm early childhood education major, I feel like it's so important to educate myself so that when I go become an educator, I know how to set the example and model for these students, because they are going to be our future generations and we want them to be educated moving forward. And moving forward, educated. I feel like certain things have been embedded in our society and culture and the way we're raised, to kind of just make sure you're having those important conversations. And really, even if they're uncomfortable, we got to get through them and talk to them so that they're not uncomfortable. So there's a mutual understanding moving forward. Education is very, very important. And I think that everyone should continue to strive to be more educated. For example, the Tulsa, the Elaine massacre, there's so many things that are out there. And technology it's a great thing to have right now, especially with what's going on. So please continue to stay united. And
thank you, Nadine. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, really, really appreciate it. Thank you for your leadership and for sharing your wonderful and inspirational thoughts. Our next speaker is Nii-Quartelai. Quartey, brother, I hope I'm saying your name right, and I apologize if I butchered it. Who's a senior advisor and national LGBTQ liaison at AARP, who will be speaking on a topic entitled "Reflections as a Movement Builder." Take it away.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the warm invitation, Tony, and it's so wonderful to see Queenstar and so many other folks I've had a chance to meet over the years. Thanks for this opportunity. I just want to start off by honoring the memory of George Floyd. I'm sure you all honored him earlier, but I just want to continue to invoke his name after just watching that soul-stirring but still heart-wrenching funeral that took place today. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Quartey, and I want to share just some personal thoughts and personal reflections as a movement builder. I'm a native of the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm not sure how many folks from the Bay Area are on this call, but hey. I'm the son of a father from Ghana, West Africa, a father who grew up near the height of the Pan-African movement on the continent. a father that was born into colonial Ghana when they were still under British rule. I'm also the son of a mother from the Tampa Bay area. And shout out to anybody from the Tampa Bay area on the line. My mom grew up near the height of the civil rights movement and integrated into an all-white high school her sophomore year in high school. And I invoke my parents because, like so many of you that are also first generation, so much of who we are and how we walk through the world and view the world is influenced by the environments that we grow up in and the discourse that we're exposed to as kids. Speaking of kids, I'm the youngest of 5 boys, David, James, John, and Joseph. And then you have Nii-Quartelai. Yeah, I can see you all laughing. People tend to be tickled by that. But let me tell you this, growing up and having a name like Nii-Quartelai makes you different. And as a kid, you just want to be like everybody else. And so it was tough growing up and not feeling like the oddball. But as I've grown into myself as a leader, as a movement builder, I've found so much power in embracing all the things that make us different and all the ways in which we are different. Imagine what it's like to come to realize that in addition to growing up, as a first generation kid in an immigrant family, amongst a lot of testosterone, in a part of the country and with parents that brought a heightened consciousness around civil and human rights issues, imagine if you also came to know that what made you different was that you were gay. And that was very much my story. I was an ally before I knew I was gay. And I think this perspective has really informed how I continue to show up in the world as a movement builder. I could never imagine that my journey of self-discovery would carry me to Washington, D.C., to be a part of the work of AARP, and building a portfolio, building a practice that supports and engages LGBTQ older adults across the country. The opportunity to be a part of consequential and pioneering work found me probably around the same time I was looking for it. There's a book. I noticed folks have been, naming different books that folks might want to check out. And one book that comes to mind is The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge. I'm an organizational leadership scholar, and so excuse me while I geek out for a moment. The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge, who is a celebrated learning theorist. One of the tidbits that really stands out to me from that book is what Peter Senge says about transformation. He says that transformation happens when we're willing to begin to re-examine some of our underlying assumptions. I'll say that again. Transformation happens when we're willing to begin to re-examine some of our underlying assumptions. And so sit with that for a moment. Turn the TV off for a moment. Turn your phone off for a moment and sit with that. And take in the transformation that is happening before our very eyes, the transformation that we get to be a part of. We get to listen in this moment. We get to learn from one another in this moment. We get to challenge our own underlying assumptions about ourselves and the world around us in this moment. And as Dr. Maya Angelou, a bright light in this world, as Dr. Maya Angelou used to say, we get to be a rainbow in the cloud for somebody else. And I couldn't think of a more fitting thought, a more fitting idea to invoke today, on the day that we continue to mourn the loss of George Floyd, a day that is filled with a great deal of social unrest, and on a day that's also part of Pride Month, being celebrated around the world. As we move forward, it's important that as we witness the protest, as we participate in peaceful protests over racial justice, and face the ongoing COVID pandemic, that our nation desperately needs to heal. That we want to be instruments of change to be a part of that healing. We want to be instruments that help people to understand that we're stronger facing these challenges as a nation when we're united. And the fastest way to do that is by understanding who we are as agents of change, understanding what it is that we have to offer, leaning into the things that make us different, because that's what I believe, and that's what I've witnessed, has made folks some of the best allies in the LGBTQ community, allies to the Black community, and so many other community groups that need support. And so I hope there's a little bit of time for Q&A, but I really want to just sort of leave folks with this thought. And I think I saw Brother Hill Harper on the line, and so I'm sure he will appreciate me invoking this scene from Black Panther. Y'all remember that scene from Black Panther when T'Challa was getting his butt kicked, and his mother, the Queen Mother, yells out to him, "Remember who you are. Remember who you are." And so I hope that on this day and every day, moving forward, as we renew our commitments to fighting for what's right and remembering who has the least among us, that we will remember indeed who we are. And so I'm very fortunate that each and every day I get to carry that with me as I get to join hands with my colleagues at AARP. But even outside of my professional capacity, in service to the community, on boards and in volunteer work, there's plenty of work to do. And so let's all get about the business of doing it, and doing it more thoughtfully and intentionally. And so thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doctor. Really, really appreciate your leadership, your thought-provoking, and obviously, quoting Maya Angelou, who's incredible. Just wanted to let everyone know that we are having an LGBTQ Charla at 4 p.m. Eastern Time this Friday. So please feel free to join. More information on our website, hhf.org, for Zoom login information. We are going to keep the conversation going. We do have a couple more speakers. This has been great so far. Thank you, everyone, for your leadership and really thought-provoking. This is incredible. Our next speaker, we're going to throw it back to the youth. Our next speaker is Miriam Trahoret, who's a graduating 2020 senior. Congratulations, Miriam, from
Thank you.
High School, who will be sharing her own personal experience. Take it away.
Okay, hello guys. A little background about me. I'm from Gaithersburg, Maryland. My parents immigrated from Ivory Coast, West Africa, in around the 1950s, something like that. Mm-hmm. I would like to address that this isn't only a Black issue, it's a Latino issue, it's an Asian issue, it's a Native American issue, it's a people of color issue, it's an issue that's happening in America, that we have all fallen victim to discrimination and injustice in our country, and where we're all supposed to be treated equally. The Black Lives Movement is not to invalidate anyone's pains or feelings to the issues that are occurring in other people's communities. This isn't only our fight. Ahmaud Arbery's death, George Floyd and Breonna Taylor's death should all be affecting us, because God forbid, because that could be your brother, this could be your sister, this could be your mother. I believe that we all need to be that we all should educate ourselves as well as our peers, because you can see that people love the Black culture, but they don't love to learn about the issues that have occurred in the Black community, or that are currently happening in the Black community. We should be able to have the uncomfortable conversations, because that is what helps people grow. Being a teenager, you can see that a lot of people that are just very ignorant, and they don't understand like the issues that are happening, and that this is just an issue that only Black people face, but it's an issue that happens all around us. So educating yourself and also educating your peers is also a great way to help us. As an ally, I think it's okay to ask questions despite the fears that you may have. If you feel like your questions may not be knowledgeable, it's okay, because people will correct you. And instead of being silent and just wondering, it's always great to ask questions. There's many things that you can do as an ally, such as you can go protesting, you can sign petitions, you can check up on your other Black friends, you can do your research. There are so many things that you can do, but the worst thing that you can do is stay silent. Any win for the Black community is the win for all of us. And I think that this is the best time that we should all come together, because this isn't only our fight, it's a fight for all of America. Yeah, that's it. Thank you guys for bringing me
Miriam,
to this.
Thank you for being the change that is needed now, and for your leadership now, because as we all know, your generation is the one that's really, really going to make a huge impact moving forward. So again, thank you for your leadership. Really appreciate you being here. We're going to keep this going. We have several speakers left. So let's keep this conversation going. It's being really, really powerful so far. Our next speaker is my Dominican brother, Sid Wilson, who's the president and CEO of the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility, ASED. And Sid will be speaking on his personal experience as an Afro-Latino. Sid, take it away.
Thank you, hermano. I appreciate that, Dario. And of course, I do want to just acknowledge the Hispanic Heritage Foundation, to Tony Tijerino, who has not only been just an amazing president and CEO, but just a staunch champion for social justice for all communities, Black, Latino, Asian American, LGBTQ. And so I just want to acknowledge him, and of course the whole HHF team, and of course Emmanuel Pletes, the board chair. So thank you to HHF. As I like to start by saying, buenas tardes, mi gente, and good afternoon. I know we only have less than 5 minutes, so let me just cut right to the chase. All of us should recognize that it is okay to not be okay. It is okay to not be okay, because regardless of all of my professional successes, I was a Forbes #1 ranked Wall Street analyst. I was appointed by President Barack Obama. I was on the cover of Black Enterprise and Latino magazine, and now president and CEO of one of the leading organizations on Hispanic inclusion. None of that matters when I take off my professional clothing, put my casual clothing, drive a car, and go on the highway. Because when I'm behind the wheel and a police officer sees me, he sees a Black man behind the wheel, and as we all know, it is called driving while Black. And this is the experiences for so many African Americans and so many Afro-Latinos. And my message is primarily to our Latino brothers and sisters that are listening to this, because we need to recognize that the challenges that have been happening in our community, whether it's immigration or a lot of the education, and also the injustices that are happening in our community, is put ourselves in the shoes of the others. When I talk to my African American brothers and sisters, I said, put yourselves in the shoes of a dreamer. When you're told as a teenager that all of a sudden you're applying to college and now you can't because you found out that you're undocumented, and how unfair it is that you will be treated differently. And when we talk about how we put each other's shoes, those are things that we can do to understand this. Now put yourselves in the shoes of a black man or a black woman in America, whether it's what we saw, the just the sickening deaths that we've seen with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. What we saw in Central Park in New York City when Amy Cooper, who was at a prestigious investment firm, tells Christian Cooper, no similar name, that if you don't stop recording me, I'm going to call the police and tell them that there is an African American threatening my life. Thinking that her whiteness gives her special privilege. She knew exactly what she was doing when she was doing that, and she's only sorry because she got caught. And all of us who saw CNN, when we saw an Afro-Latino brother, Omar Jimenez, who was doing nothing but reporting on CNN about what was happening in Minneapolis, and the Minneapolis Police Department arrested him. To this day, we still don't have an explanation as to why Omar Jimenez was arrested, cuffed, taken into custody, and yet the white reporters and journalists were left to continue to report. That tells you the following. There needs to be a disruption of the American default of racism. There must be a default of the systematic racist system that we have within not only law enforcement, but the entire criminal justice system that has impacted all of us. And so how can we be better allies to each other? How can Latinos be better allies to the Black community? The first thing is to recognize is that what is happening is absolutely wrong and injustice. And number two is recognize that our silence is unacceptable. That we must all be a part of the solution. And don't assume that somebody else is going to be the solver of the problems that are happening right now with the racism that has been happening within the police department, as well as the racism that happens all over the place. In my role, as I said, my role is to advance Hispanic inclusion in corporate America. I'll tell you a quick personal story because I know I want to make sure I stay within my time limit. The first 6 months of my being CEO, probably the first year, when I told someone, my name is Sid Wilson, president and CEO of Russell, the first reaction is, oh, how did that happen? And I know that that's not implying about how did I go from being a Wall Street professional to a nonprofit CEO. The question they're asking is, you're Black. How did you become the leader of a national Hispanic organization, one of only two Afro-Latino CEOs, the other my good brother, Marco Davis, who's the CEO for Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. And I know what they're asking. They said, how did you become the president and CEO? Why is your last name Wilson? Often I'll say, what's the difference if my last name is Wilson or Gonzalez or Rodriguez? I came from Africa. That was none of our last names. So what are you talking about? Why are you understanding, why are you dwelling on my Blackness instead of my professionalness? And so that is where we have a lot of work to do. There's no question that we have a lot of work to do on, in terms of changing the system and changing how the white community views all of us, Latinos and Blacks. But we also need to be stronger allies that when there's something that's happening within our communities, and I do want to just mention that not only I'm glad that our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are here, but a month ago, I called out people that were anti-Asian because they were trying to link COVID-19 to Asian Americans here in the US, and there was this anti-Asian backlash, and I'm not Asian, but I said it's important for us to speak out for our Asian brothers and sisters who are here who are not really white. We must call out racism, discrimination, and injustices regardless of which community it is. And we must stand up, because if we don't, at some point, it's going to be you directly. And I know that whenever I go anywhere, like many people, I have to drive a car, and I have not only my license, I have my business card, because you're taught to make sure to let the officer know, don't think this is happening. Because when I was in high school, I shared this with Davenport yesterday, I had a police officer pull his gun on me, and thinking that I was a criminal or suspect on something, and you never forget that experience. And the only thing that's common was the fact that it was me, another black passenger in the car, and that's what caused us to pull it over. So we must stand together. And there are 5 million Afro-Latinos in the U.S. And so we got to make sure that we continue to fight this fight together. And I'm so proud of our collaboration with the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. I'm proud of my board of directors, 14 organizations that do amazing work out there in the community. But together, we can disrupt the default of racism in America. With that, muchísimas gracias. Que Dios bendiga y pa'lante mi gente. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sid. Thank you so much, brother, for your leadership and really just for being real and telling it like it is. Really, really appreciate your leadership and your insight. Let's keep it going. We only have a few more speakers. This conversation is really, really insightful. Our next speaker is Siobhan Davenport, and she is the president and CEO of the Crittenton Services of Greater Washington. She will be speaking on her title is We Are Stronger Together, How Black and Brown Women Can Build a Sisterhood. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Dario. And thank you, Tony, for your vision and your leadership in providing this important platform. And I just want to thank all of the speakers. There's just been so much wisdom and just beautiful Black voices sharing their personal experiences and helping to unite the Black and Brown communities. As Dario mentioned, I am the president and CEO of Crittenton Services of Greater Washington. We're an organization focused on the well-being, safety, equity, and bright futures of our 600 mostly Black and Brown teen girls living in the district and Montgomery County, Maryland. But I am also a Black woman and mother of a Black teenage daughter and son. And the issues of racism, inequality, and police brutality against Black and Brown people that are now so publicly discussed are also deeply personal. I am fearful for my children. I'm fearful as they perform ordinary tasks, running in our mixed race community, bird watching in a public park, wearing a hoodie while running errands, and just having a concerned citizen thinking that they look suspicious and calling the police and having that end in a brutal manner. But yet, even during this time of public pain and protest, I have hope. As Dario mentioned, I would like to speak about We're Stronger Together, how Black and Brown women and girls can build a sisterhood. You see, Crittenton has a successful model of empowering girls who live in communities with many challenges, and it can be applied to building a strong sisterhood between Latina and Black women and girls. For the past 6 years, 100% of our girls have graduated from high school, even in schools with a 55% graduation rate. We are intentional about acknowledging the differences of the girls while fostering understanding on how we're alike. I work with a team of dedicated professionals who create the trust and safe space for Crittenton girls to have a courageous conversation about themselves, their communities, and the world. One alumna said, "I may not have liked everyone when I first joined the group, but I ended my 4 years by loving everyone there. The girls form a true bond. Sisterhood is necessary." One of our program leaders hosted a field trip for our Black and Brown girls to see the movie Harriet, about Harriet Tubman, the slave who freed not just herself, but over 300 slaves. Our girls had robust conversations on the similarities of the slaves' journey to freedom and the journey that some of our Latina girls experienced to arrive in the United States. That shared experience helped the girls to appreciate one another on a deeper level, as well as realize that we, despite our physical differences, have many commonalities. Sisterhood is hope. When our Latina girls wanted to march before the Supreme Court last year in support of DACA, their Black sisters joined them in solidarity. As you can see from the pictures, they have truly embraced Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote of, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Our girls stand together to fight for equal treatment and access to opportunity in our country. Sisterhood is power. Our Black and brown teen girls are deeply impacted by the images of our police brutality, and some have joined peaceful protests. One Latina said so profoundly, quote, "It's time for a change. We all need to stand together," unquote. Black women are a strong voting bloc, and it's predicted that we will be vital to electing the next president of the United States. Imagine if our Latina allies join forces to fight for equality, economic stability, healthcare, education, and jobs development and growth. As Zoe Kravitz said, once women find sisterhood, there's nothing stronger. I do have a call of action. We are at an important moment in time in our history. I'm calling on our Black, brown communities and our white allies to come together in support of the voices of Black and brown girls as we seek the systemic change essential to ensuring an equitable society. We all have a role to play, and having been asked by many in our community, have included concrete actions we can take to continue the change we all support. I invite you to participate in our High Tea Talk with a Teen Girl on Thursday, June 25th. You can register on our website. It's a free event, but it's an opportunity to lift up youth voices and hear directly from the girls. So I thank you very much. My time is almost over. I would like to end by just saying Black Lives Matter yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Take care, be safe, and stay well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Siobhan. Really appreciate your leadership in what just seems like an incredible school. So I'm sure the kids are lucky to have you as one of their leaders. Let's keep this going. We have a few speakers for our panelists. I see that several people have had questions in our Q&A discussion. So feel free to answer them if you'd like, and if it applies to anything of if it was part of your talk. But let's go ahead and keep this going. Again, we only have a few more speakers remaining. Our next speaker is Mr. Javier Martinez, who will be speaking on his personal experience titled "The Talk." Javier, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry to be late. Thank you to Tony, Dario, all the staff of the Hispanic Heritage Foundation. Now I know it's getting late, so I'm just going to kick it quick and dirty. So essentially, I have 7 points that how Latinos can be much better allies to Blacks during this time. Number 1, don't judge the protests, riots, whatever you want to call them. You cannot police or judge how someone expresses their own pain. Whether you agree or not, you have to know that these protests are an expression and a cry for help. They're an act of desperation. It's really the language of the unheard, as Martin Luther King would say. And as a collective, our patience left our bodies when we watched George Floyd take his last breath. And to be honest, never in the history of protests has there ever been a right way to protest. From peaceful demonstrations, sit-ins, marches, kneeling, like Colin Kaepernick, each act is always criticized because it challenges the comfort of those in power, which is exactly the point. We always look for hope in our mourning, so please support us and don't judge that. Number 2, learn your history. Now, there's a Spanish phrase that I love because I feel like it describes the black person's experience here. It's like, no soy de aquí ni de allá. It's like, we're not from here, but we're not from there either. And it's like, you got to remember, we were brought here as slaves, and we're not from here, but we're also disconnected from our African roots. So we're here trying to find hope and find roots here. And, and when I talk about history, I don't mean the whitewashed, sanitized version of everything. I need you to be educated in the issues that pertain to us. You be versed in our pain, like trust the experiences and don't write things off as anecdotes for people saying, because I have examples of being handcuffed, being accused of drugs, being accused of a number of things. And I was never involved in anything nearing that. But because my skin color was seen as a threat, I was accused of things like that. That pain is not new. It's just been unheard. As a collective, we have this generational PTSD, and, we don't have the privilege to be colorblind. We never have. We're forced to remember it every single day. When we watch these videos of, our brothers and sisters getting murdered, and we have to watch our worst fears happen in real time with no confidence that justice will be served. I mean, that's heartbreaking, and we're fed up. I mean, and that as other speakers have mentioned, that's why Amy Cooper's phone call was so insidious, because she weaponized our skin color as a threat and put his life at stake. And with my skin color seen as a weapon, I will always be seen as armed and dangerous. I've had to tell my nephew about George Floyd. I had to tell my niece about Trayvon Martin. My mother had to tell me about Rodney King. My grandparents had to tell my parents about Emmett Till. How many other names do we not know? Now, number 3, don't other us. I think part of the problem with this, like for white people and some Latinos, is that, they see us as other and we're different and we're separate. But, slave ships also went to Latin America. There's a number, like Sid said, there are 5 million Afro-Latinx people in the United States. I mean, educate yourself about the African roots and recognize that within the narratives of your own culture, whether it's music, food, dance, art, customs, we want you to see our Blackness, see our contributions, and honor them as unique, indispensable, and necessary, because they are. Number 4, march with us. And after you're done marching with us, march to the nearest Black-owned business and spend your money there. Buy Black, donate to social justice organizations, do all you can. Go to bookstores. There's Black wine. There's everything. And as I've been telling people, let your actions match your captions. Number 5, I don't care how woke you are, socially conscious, whatever. You need to check yourself every single day. Check your friends too. Check your mom, check your grandma and them, all of them. Because, this is a constant battle. We have to challenge our own prejudice, our habits, our opinions, our stereotypes. We have to identify where we accept anti-Blackness and racism and where we let microaggressions go unchallenged. So I challenge you to ask yourself 3 questions all the time. How do you see Black people that aren't your friend, your child, or your partner? Have you taken the time to understand your Black friends and their perspective? Really understand them. 3, and this is probably the most important one, is like, how do you let people talk about Black people behind closed doors? Like, what happens? What transpires? What do you say? What do you allow? What jokes? What stereotypes? Oh, pro tip, never say the N-word. It's synonymous with hatred, oppression, subordination. I don't care, people try to turn it into a term of endearment, and that's another conversation for another day, but there's no place for it. It doesn't help anybody. Number 6, we need you to keep publicizing. Post, shout out people in life who have made an impact. Share resources, share information as you learn. There is absolutely no shame in asking a question, no shame in not knowing. There's no shame in any of that. The only shame is to not learn, to remain ignorant. If you aren't a political person, I need you to stop there and think about the privilege in that statement. Because this isn't a political issue whatsoever. This is a humanitarian issue. People are dying. Every week, we're seeing new videos, new things that are coming to light. This is a humanitarian issue. As a human, you should care. And if you don't, and your friends judge you for caring, you need to question why that is and challenge them on it. And remember that, when the posting stops and slows down, that doesn't mean you do. Because combating a prejudicial mindset is really a marathon, and it's a constant process. And, honestly, I don't care if you have 3 PhDs, great credentials, reference letters from Jesus, Michael Jordan, and MLK. If you don't actively participate and help, all that's for nothing. And lastly, police brutality is just one factor of systemic racism. Let's not slow down whatsoever. We haven't even touched education, housing, public health equity, hiring discrimination, sexual harassment, adultification, or colorism. So, this is a marathon again. So all this energy, thank you for all those that are attending right now and still on this late. We need your energy through the whole race. And, there's this phrase in the Black community that, y'all invited to the cookout. And, I bet you're thinking about dominoes, spades, meat on the grill and singing the fellowship. But this is the actual cookout we're talking about. In order to invite you there, we need you here right now. Sometimes everybody wants our rhythm, but right now it's time to find our blues, find the reason for them, and let's eradicate that. And honestly, last thing I want to say is that we're all alive in this time and this place for a reason and a purpose. And it's a time of enormous challenge, but even greater opportunity. And we have an opportunity right now, and one we may not have for a longer time, to eradicate those toxic systems that have been designed to destroy and divide us. The arc of the moral universe may bend towards justice, but it's never bent without total commitment and will. And, for those from a religious tradition, there's a saying that God makes you uncomfortable in order to make you move. Well, God's surely made us uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. I'm sure the rest of you are. So let's move. Because today I'm asking for all of you to help. Be those allies, be those people for the people in your lives, and even the people you don't know. And we can only do it together. Again, let all of our actions match our captions.
Thank you, Javier. Really, really powerful, brother. Really appreciate you sharing those 7 points. And please be sure to include them in the chat, as people would like to make sure that they write them down. And just to everyone, I know we only have a few more speakers left, but a reminder that our speakers are not professionals or experts, and they are part of a variety of Black communities sharing their experiences, thoughts, and personal perspectives. Please be mindful of this and be respectful in the chat and in the Q&A windows. With that being said, our next speaker is Queenstar Akrong, who's the founder and CEO of Adisa Advising, and she will be speaking on her own personal experience. Queenstar, take it away.
Hi, thanks, Dario. Hi, everyone. Queenstar. I was at Charla like a couple of weeks ago, and it's cool to be invited back. So this is obviously in a very emotional time. So I've been finding myself crying a lot when I'm talking. So I wrote down what I wanted to say, and so I hope you guys will be okay with me reading what I wrote. Thank you again to HHF for having me. I'm excited to be part of this family, and I'm so thankful for this opportunity. So I remember the first time I saw a white person. I was about 5 years old. I remember how much people stopped and stared. I was living in Ghana at the time. I remember when I first came to America, I was floored to find out there were so many versions of white people that could look white, but be from Latin America. I was truly floored. Growing up in the DMV, specifically in the Silver Spring area, I became friends with people from Venezuela, El Salvador, Guatemala, and folks from the Caribbean, South, and Central America. I loved Dominican birthday cakes, the Mexican piñata parties. I love that my Hispanic friends ate the same food as me. I love that your rice and beans was what we called wache in Ghana. Your plantanos were called kelewele where I was from. But what I loved most, more than anything, was that your music reminded me so much of home. All the dances that I tried to learn, but I had a hard time doing them because I was used to dancing with my hips, not necessarily with my legs. As I moved to college, I majored in international relations and wanted to minor in African studies. But going to a small college, there wasn't a robust curriculum on Africa. But we had a professor from Argentina, and so we had a plethora of classes on Latin America. And I figured, why not? Why not learn something more? And through that is how I found out that there was a whole diaspora of Black people like me all across Latin America. And for someone who has always been and always will be about Black excellence, I was shook. How could I uncover this diaspora story when I got to college? I was absolutely shook because I didn't know that Black people lived in South and Central America. So I started to ask myself, why is that so? How come I didn't know that there were Black Cubans? How come that I didn't know that Brazil had the largest population of Black people outside of Nigeria? How come my Dominican friends didn't consider themselves Black? Why was the African story across the pond so hidden and hidden in plain sight? So I sought to learn. I learned about the deep divide between Haitians and Dominicans that was fanned by dictator Trujillo. I learned about the Afro-Colombians who still wore clothing that was similar to my Ghanaian clothes. The carnival celebrations in Brazil reminded me of Ghana. The Cuban grandmothers reminded me of my own. I yearned to learn more. So I asked my Hispanic friends and peers, why is that the case? For this movement to continue, it is important to highlight the experience of all Hispanics. In order to move this future forward, I implore you to amplify the works of Afro-Latinos. For the diaspora to truly heal, we must know the stories about our sisters and brothers across Central and South America. I'm currently leading work with the Latino media company and took it upon myself to check out their website. The only picture I saw of Black people were the folks leading the protest. I find that completely abysmal. To truly move forward, we must amplify the voices of all Latinos and stop perpetuating colorism, racism, and division within each other. As an African immigrant, especially one with a shaky status, I am thankful for my Hispanic brothers and sisters for leading the immigration movement in this country. We stand behind you as you lead the cause to create a more just immigration system, and we're thankful for you for leading the mantle. But just as the African immigrant population and African American community has supported the immigration movement you are leading, we hope you hear our cry loud and clear that we need your solidarity in the Black Lives Matter movement. As the great Rihanna once said, tell your friends to pull up. So I implore you, amplify the voices of our brothers and sisters that look like us and are from where you are from. We want to know more about them and stand with us as we work together to make the world a better place for all people, regardless of skin color. Thank you so much for this time. And I yield back my time to the chair. Thank you so much.
Queenstar, thank you for enlightening us this evening. Really, really appreciate your light. So that's all I can say. Really appreciate your light. Our next speaker, we only have a few more speakers left, ladies and gentlemen. We're almost to the end of our time here. Our next speaker is Marco Davis, who's president and CEO, Afro-Latino brother of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, CHCI. Marco will be speaking on getting from us to them to we. Take it away, brother.
Hi, thank you, Dario. Thank you, Tony. I want to thank all the folks at HHF for putting together this and all the other charlas. I think you all have created one of the most vital mediums for our community to engage in productive dialogues like this that'll actually help our community move forward. I want to start off also on a personal note, as many folks have. I want to mention that this particular charla was really significant for me. I was honored to be asked by Tony to speak, and I was particularly motivated to try and engage and try to find some thoughts that I could share around it because, you see, I identify as Afro-Latino, I identify as Latino, I also identify as Black, as African-American, because my mother is actually Mexican, and my father is Jamaican, from the island of Jamaica, West Indies. And each of them were raised in their respective countries, arriving in the United States as adults together. And so I learned about both of their cultures. I learned about both of their broader communities and populations. And I've moved through my life claiming my space in both the Latino community and in the non-Latino Black community, if you will. And so it was important for me to talk about sort of how I've tried to personally work to build bridges between the two communities as best I can, and to share some thoughts and some observations about how we might try to do things on a more systemic, organizational, community-wide level. As you heard, several times today, there have been instances where there's been division, there's been outright animosity between the two communities, right? I've actually worked in either the Latino community or the Black community or both through pretty much my entire professional career, which is more than 20 years. And I've not too rarely found myself in the midst of conversations where the conversation begins to be about an us and a them. And as you can imagine, depending on the conversation, it was always confusing to me because depending on the conversation, I wasn't really sure which part of the us I was and which part of the them I was, because I really felt like part of both at the same time. So the question for me has been, and I think the really point of this charla is, how do we get to a we? How do we get from us and them to we? How do we collectively come together and recognize our strengths and frankly, our power? And I'll get to that in a minute. And I think conversations like this are in fact part of that path. I think the resources that folks have shared are part of that path. And there's a lot of the really brilliant, insightful comments that people and the advice that people have given throughout this charla today that I think are part of that journey. And so I don't want to repeat a lot of the things that other folks have said. What I want to share and what I want to point out that I think is worth also raising up is that there are people, and there are in fact even organizations who you might say have been working at this for quite a while, for whom this struggle, for whom this effort, for whom building bridges is not new. In fact, many of the people on this call who've spoken today, and I suspect many of the people in the audience chose to dial in and be a part of this charla because you all are quite familiar with this effort, with the need, the desire, and in fact, hopefully you've seen progress. I would argue, and I count myself as one of the very few small efforts among many who have tried to contribute to not falling for this false division, who have not allowed the erasure of the Afro-Latino segment of our population, who have not allowed the anti-Black sentiment, the anti-Black racism, if you will, within the Latino community to dominate, and similarly have not allowed the anti-Latino sentiment to dominate in the African-American community. We've stood up and built solidarity between the two communities here in the United States and actually beyond the United States, right? From a hemispheric perspective, from a global perspective. There are many people doing that. And I think, and like I said, organizations, and these folks can be resources for all of us. I think some of the folks referenced some books, some authors, some speakers, some great thinkers. And I think, again, it's important, as everyone said, to educate yourselves, to find out, again, about sort of ways in which you can help move on this journey, ways in which you can raise this up, ways in which you can interrupt. You can ensure not to allow the racism and the anti-Blackness that is too prevalent in the Latino community to paralyze us in the Latino community with despair. You can find ways to not let us be trapped in the negativity of purely focusing on that aspect of our culture and our community. Make no mistake, we need to interrupt it for sure. We should not ever allow it. But we also, again, can't stay only there. We need to focus on and raise up the progress that has been made, that is being made, and will continue to be made. I think we also need to think about not just what we're against, but what we're for, and start to envision the world we want to see. We should absolutely, I think another thing to mention, I think someone mentioned earlier today, I believe, this idea of a cancel culture. We need to show some grace to people who are on their journey, even as they might make mistakes, they might say the wrong thing. It's by no means easy to unlearn the racism that permeates, that is pervasive all around us. It's people talk about it like its own version of a virus that has soaked in and affects everyone, Black, Latino, white, etc. Right? It is something that has affected us and impacted us, and that we are in some ways collectively, only in some ways, all victims of it. Right? And there are obviously folks who are perpetrators of it. But let's not talk about that crowd now. Let's talk about the folks who, again, want to do right, who want to figure out the path. And in my mind, it's important to remember that we can hold those folks up. I think it's important to remember that just as not all Latinos are non-Black Latinos, there are, in fact, Latinos who are Black. It's also true that not all Latinos are anti-Black. We are much more than that when you think about all of us. So as we look forward, it's important to remember that we also don't have to reinvent the wheel. As I mentioned, let's look to our elders, let's look to our current leaders, let's look to our peers who are further along on the journey, who've begun to make progress, who've been working on this for many years, who've learned some lessons, made some mistakes, found some solutions, and have begun to forge a path that in many ways it'll be easier for us to help follow and add our voices and our struggles and our labors to. Of course, as many people mentioned, I think it's absolutely important to say at an absolute bare minimum, and I would argue it's truly the absolute bare minimum, but surprisingly, even this is something that it takes effort for folks to say. We must start with all of us in our community saying Black Lives Matter, period, the end. Not with a qualification, not with a and also, not with a Black Lives Matter, period. This is the moment to recognize that, and we can build on that as we go forward and forge that alliance, bring in more issues. As we look for solutions, we'll find that the solutions that the Black Lives Matter movement are trying to solve will actually solve many of the other issues that we seek to address, the wrongs that we seek to right. And we will then build a broader effort, a broader coalition, a broader alliance to actually knock down all of the injustices, all of the inequalities collectively. But this is the moment. And I think in many ways, this is why they brought this Charla together, and we've all been brought together, because we need to recognize that this is that moment to have that conversation. And finally, I would say that part of the way this continues, and part of something we should also keep in mind as we do this effort, I know it's been a very, very difficult time. I know folks have felt and had reactions that have stirred up emotions in all levels. But it's also important to notice and to claim the power that we do have. Now, I'm not naive. I know that we have not yet accessed all the power we need in order to break down the historical, structural, and systemic racism that permeates our society. But I think it's also important to note and to remember, and as we get towards the end of this charla, to keep in mind, ending on somewhat of a slightly more positive note, as we've begun to expose and recognize all of the challenges and problems we have in the Latino community, it's also important to note that we are not completely powerless. Because you see, the great author Alice Walker once wrote that the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Another very famous person by the name of Cesar Chavez put it this way, and I think you all know this quote: "Once social change begins, it cannot be reversed. You cannot uneducate the person who has learned to read. You cannot humiliate the person who feels pride. You cannot oppress the people who are not afraid anymore. And it's interesting to me that often when you look it up, when you Google it, the quote ends there. But interestingly, the very next sentence of that speech is, we have seen the future and the future is ours. When we come to, that's the end of the quote. When we come together, when we take a stand, as thousands upon thousands of Black, Latino, Latina, Latinx, and so many other people have shown over the past 2 weeks, we have tremendous potential to make an impact and shape the future. Public policies are changing, are being introduced. Ideas that just 3 weeks ago were out of the realm of possibility and out of the mainstream are now being discussed in decision-making circles. And that's a direct result of our collective power. So to close with my favorite bilingual quote, we must always keep in mind that sí se puede and yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marco. Really appreciate your leadership as always, and for sharing those incredible quotes with our audience today. Ladies and gentlemen, we have one more speaker, but before we go, before we go to our last speaker, just wanted to apologize about the technical issues in the chat. I understand that the issues have been resolved. Thank you for pointing this out to us. Know that in no way, shape, or form were we trying to ignore or anybody's remarks or anything of that nature. But with that being said, for all of our panelists, please be sure to drop your Instagram, Facebook, Twitter on the chat so that all of our listeners today can continue to follow you and continue to hear your wisdom. With that, our final speaker of the evening is Bayona Marshall, who is a marketing strategist and is going to bring it home. She's a marketing strategist at Mission Partners, and she will share her own personal experience. Bayona, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Dario, for introducing me. I'm at HHF for allowing me to be a part of this Charla and all of the great speakers that came before me. I'm just in awe of all the sentiment shared here today, and I'm excited to see, what everyone takes and the actions that we take going forward. So before I begin, just similar to Miriam, I would just like to acknowledge the fact that the issues we are facing related to police brutality and the racial injustices that are being brought to light for some are more than just the Black issue. These issues touch many minority groups, and just because this is what the media is showing us now does not mean that other communities of color are not being affected. So there are a few ways where I feel the Latino community can help support the Black community during this time. Romell touched on some earlier with the 20 Things graphics. But I just want to share a little bit of the things that I've seen my Latino friends have done for me or supported me and other Black colleagues during this time. So one, just really being checking in. I know someone in the chat mentioned when they checked in on their Black friend, they didn't get a response. And that's understandable, knowing that a lot of people are trying to console and to show support. But even if that person doesn't respond, try offering, advice, like don't forget to breathe, or try focusing on self-care, or, I can be there for you during this time. Just kind of flipping the narrative instead of asking a question or kind of, being picky and pointing, but just, simply saying, I'm going to be here for you. I'm here for you. How can I help you during this time? And then my second would be to speak up. We've heard that sentiment throughout this entire Charla. And even though it's important to speak up and express how you feel and stand in solidarity with the Black community, just make sure that you're being aware and really researching and understanding the issues. And yes, certain things on Instagram or Twitter may seem relevant, but it's really important to do your research, thinking about, I'm a strategist, so I'm on social media a lot. Blackout Tuesday, the way that kind of came out, yes, it was a collective action and protest, collaborated and founded by the music industry, but it washed away a lot of the issues and videos and things that, we needed to, further uplift and show people what's going on for the Black community. So just ultimately, once you do your research, then speak up. And as mentioned earlier, this is not just a Black issue. Many minority groups have faced some of these same issues. So just making sure that we're doing our research and then speaking up. And speak up to make sure that, you're being heard. A lot of changes have happened in the past 2 weeks that, weren't there before. So we're seeing that our voices are being heard. So just, continue to speak up. And some of you may or may not know, but I did work for HHF before. I joined their team right after college. And I can honestly say that as the only Black woman on the team at that time, I believe I was, correct me if I'm wrong, I always felt a part of the community. There was never a moment where I felt like an outsider or, that I wasn't welcomed. There may have been a few times where I didn't understand Spanish, which I could have learned on my own. But I definitely feel that when you're a part of a community, regardless of race or ethnic backgrounds or groups, you're awarded that luxury to hear different perspectives where everyone can be heard. And by listening to some of the speeches at the award ceremonies and participating in the coding academies at HHF, I was able to really see the value of the Latino community and youth, past my own biases, how they brought value. And I'm hoping that, throughout this conversation today in this Charla, that the Latino community is able to see the value that the Black community brings and adds to yours as well. So overall, I just hope that we can all work together to accomplish great things and build a better America. And just remember, check in and speak up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rayona. Really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone. And then in just closing, what can we do more? As a community, we really need to listen more and just listen and be there for others. As a Dominican American, I've always felt that, am I Black? Am I brown? And what am I? And as I've learned the history, especially in the Dominican Republic with Trujillo, and against everything, all the incredible negative things that he did towards Haitians, that for me has really stuck. For example, 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of taking my mother to Lagos, Nigeria, for a trip. And during that time, we actually visited Bagadri, Nigeria, which is a slave port. And we visited the Museum of Slavery. It's in the southwest coast of Nigeria, about 2.5 hours from Lagos. This is actually one of 3 slave ports in Africa, the other being Senegal and South Africa, where most of the slaves actually passed the Gold Coast to come into the Americas. But what people don't understand, or they may not know in terms of the history, is what people may not know about the history is that those slave ships actually stopped in Brazil, in Venezuela, in Panama, in Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Mexico, before they actually landed in the United States. So in terms of if we're Black or not, our history in regards to Black and brown is intertwined. And the last thing that I want to say is, these protests have really shown that we can all come together as a people, and that collectively our voices can and will be heard. And it was so inspirational, actually, marching with tens of thousands, who knows, maybe even almost 1 million people on Saturday from Capitol Hill all the way to the White House. And most of the people, to be honest, I saw more white people, I saw more Asian people. I even saw dogs with signs that said, "If you're racist, do not pet me." So that energy was really, really heartfelt. And what was interesting is that when you're coming up what is now known as Black Lives Matter, the first building that you actually see is the AFL-CIO building, which I know last week it was burning, the hall was burning. And when I think of that, I thought of all the Latinos like Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and everyone who were part of that, who were part of the movement, and how now, if we really want to make change and systematic change, to be quite honest, we have to collectively work with these huge unions, AFL-CIOs, who essentially fund and have the power of a police unions. So if we talk about defund the police or things of that nature, we have to figure out a way to work with others, especially with AFL-CIOs and others, because it's not enough for them just to have a sign that says Black Lives Matter on their building, right? In front of all Black Lives Matter on the street. That's just not enough, and that's not going to do it in this day and age, to be quite honest with you. And times have changed. And last, for those of you interested in reading, I know folks have shared some reading materials. A great book. It's called The Black-Brown Relations and Stereotypes by Dr. Tacho Mindiola, who is retired now, but he used to run the Mexican-American Center at the University of Houston. And actually one of my mentors at the Harvard Kennedy School. This book is incredible, and it's really the bomb. William Julius Wilson, The Truly Disadvantaged, the Inner City, the Underclass, and Public Policy. If you want to know how ghettos and you want to know how projects were built and how people of color really have been systematically put into welfare systems and low-wage jobs, read this book. This book will blow your mind. So with that being said, on behalf of everyone at the Hispanic Heritage Foundation and our great leader and CEO, Antonio Tijerino, and our staff, thank you all for joining in this incredible conversation. We had a tremendous amount of individuals, that took part, and we will continue to have these safe spaces. So feel free to join at 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, as we will have a charla regarding LGBT and the LGBT community. And again, be nice to each other, continue to lead, and know that this fight is in all of us. And our kids and our grandkids are going to look back and look at this moment as a transformative moment, because we as a nation and we as a people all took lead. Muchísimas gracias. Que Dios lo bendiga y que tengan buena noche.